Welcome back. Last night we were all, many of us were blessed and encouraged and provoked by Kim Blaeser's poetry. Today we have the opportunity to hear from her again. Her poems are breathtaking, astounding, beautiful, thoughtful, intellectual in every way. Kim Blaeser is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame. She's a tribal community member, and please join me in welcoming her back.
Good to be here again. I'm not sure if I talk here and you also talk here. Doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about that one at all. Okay, good. So, good morning. It's so great to be here. I want to also say Chimigwich to Darsha and to Brian and to the Pokagon band of the Potawatomi on whose traditional lands we stand today. But I also want to extend, if anyone is here from the Pokagon people, a special thank you because we have Michael Zimmerman, who you allowed to come to Milwaukee, working with us now. I don't know if you allowed or we stole, but anyway, he's there doing language work in Milwaukee, and we're really happy for that, so thank you for that. Thank you to the Notre Dame community for welcoming us as well, and many of you know I am an alumni here, so I was really happy to connect up with a couple of professors and other people that I've known when I was a student here. So much of my work will connect with so many of the teachings that you've been presenting these last days, and I will try really hard, just because of time, not to give you my own spin on teaching, but to stick to the performance of the pieces. I'll throw in a little line and try to suppress all of that other stuff. But I think you'll see the connections. And the only thing I want to say about aesthetic is that the way that I work in poetry and image is that I think about this as an invitation. So everything is not in the poem, everything is not in the image, and it is like, I think poetry is an act of attention. And that's so much from all of our native traditions, that we're asked to pay attention to what's around us. And so this is part of the way that I call the world to attention, or call myself to pay attention to the world. And poetry is also a gesture. It's saying, look here, you know? And so that kind of reciprocity with art is my aesthetic. That's the way that I understand it, that it opens up a conversation with the listener, viewer, and that between the two parties, something is created. So that you will see that there is some ambiguity, there's some space, there are some questions, and that's all because it's reaching out and a gesture to you. The other thing about, you know, the way that I understand what we do as storytellers, as artists, as dancers, as, you know, whatever, is that we are doing both affective and effective work. In other words, Linda Hogan says, in one of her pieces, one of her poems, she says, "This is the truth, not just a poem." And later in the same poem, she says, "This is a poem, not just the truth." So that idea of something being beautiful as language, but doing something in the world. And so that's what I aspire to. On my best days, I get close. But poetry for me is also a journey, and you know, it's my own way of searching. And I feel that if we ever think, hello, truth, we've got it, then we're totally mistaken, because we're on a journey. And it's that journey of searching for understanding and, you know, kind of just being on the edge of almost that revelation that continues to fuel our energy, you know, in the world for good. So that's just a little bit about my aesthetic. I wanted to say something about this project. So this is, what you see is still a draft, and the main difference between what you're going to see in images and what it's going to be coming out the other end, I hope fairly soon, is that a lot of that will be handwritten. Like there are going to be images that right now have text from whatever we can do in Photoshop, but I'm working with an artist and she's taking my handwriting and going to put it in place of what's there now. So try to, kind of get away from the mechanical look of it and imagine what it could be. And also, this is going to be an art chapbook, and the titles will also be handwritten, and maybe some other elements. So kind of think about imagine that's your role today. And the origin of this work, a couple things. One is, of course, I call them Picto-Poems, and that's my own term, but it's coming out of the Native American pictograph, petroglyph tradition, but also Native American ledger art. The layers of text and image that in their relationship suggest something larger than just what they are alone. And so that's what I'm aspiring to and how I'm working in these. Ekphrastic is simply an inter-art connection. So ekphrastic poetry is engaging with and other art, in this case, mostly photography, okay? And the idea there is that the photograph and the poem are both doing one thing, but when you rub them together, when you juxtapose them, just like when you're making a fire, you get a spark by rubbing sticks together, right? So you get a combustion, and something else should come out of those two interconnections. So with that, I'm actually going to start with the ND Extra, okay? He's helping me because technology and I are just getting acquainted. So this is a piece, this first piece I want to start with is not a part of that, that art chapbook, but it's something about ekphrastic work and something about, I think, where we come from as Native people and our relationship to the natural world, and I'm using it sort of as a way to introduce myself today. Last night I did that family poem, and this is about a sense of beauty and how we get our sense of beauty from the place we grow up, our community, the teachings that we receive. And this is a work by Eric and Heather Chan Schatz, and they are abstract artists. And I was invited to create a poem in response to one of their works at the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art. And this is the piece I chose, and imagine it huger than that. It's just like this immense piece. And what impacted me about this were the colors, and that sort of, in my mind, I keep seeing bloom. Things are blooming, right? But also, I don't know, some of you are old enough, I know, to also see the sort of, do you remember the spirograph? The little thing, yes, so I see spirograph bursts in here. And before that even, the drawing with is it the compass that we used to use a little, right, to make these similar sort of things. So that's part of it, and just the sense of how do we understand our relationship with the world in terms of beauty. So this is called A Fractals and Pink Flowering. Imagine the geometry of flower is hunger for balance, is my child's hand on the gears of beauty, layering and interlocking color. Picture me prone, a small center point, one copper dot in the white Minnesota winter. Picture my mother drying her hands, placing the compass and spinning arcs and intersecting curves, woodland flowers growing into many-petaled mandalas, into limitlessness. A universe of circles, of symmetry, suns, stars, blooms, and orange-hued fruits, the berry squash ripe tomato wonder of belonging. My own spirograph bursts rush forth ornate like paisley, like fireworks against dark summer sky, spokes and wheels and gears meshing, each pencil thrust a tentative mark, a hopeful threading on the cogs of longing. Imagine my fingers holding tight to the friction. Watch the intricate flourishes appear on white paper, the tabula rasa transformed by oval, just another language, another voice saying hello to the spiraling bodies of self. Imagine my psychedelic Crayola yearning, my January pining after purple florals, the cosmos, the daisy mix, he loves me not, on Gurney's seed packs. Now watch as we carve splendor. My world is medicine wheel and hand drum, is powwow bustle and beadwork in woodland design, the sweep of nature tallied by curve, by eye, assembled now as scarlet fractals, as collage of vines, seed pods, and a child's simple pink infinity. Great. Okay, so now if you could go back to the other group of pieces and open it up to a single view of the crane language. I'm making him work because I have to switch between 2 pages and 1 page. So this is the one that I want to use to tell you about how this project came about. So on the right, the crane language, I was in a canoe with my son, and the great blue heron came over, and I was trying to photograph. He's moving the canoe, I'm panning my camera, and I was really excited because I got many lovely photos of it that day. And but then when I went back to print something, I realized what I saw and what fed me and made me feel so wonderful that day was not all there on the image of the bird flying through the sky, right? So I thought, how can I make what I felt, experience in that moment more visible on the page? Because we never only see what's there, right? We see what we know, what we learn, what our connections are culturally and aesthetically. And so I saw Crane Clan. I saw the spiritual connection of the Anishinaabe people to this wonderful relative, right? And so how could I make that visible? So I thought I would use woodland beadwork, and I made that the sky. And then I took pieces of the language to curve around the beadwork. And again, imagine now that it's handwritten. So then, just to say about my poetry, some of it is very narrative, as the piece was that I just read, pretty narrative and pretty accessible. Some of it is a little less so, a little bit abstract. And so this one may just bump against that other edge of things. A crane language. From where behind you ancient light enters, curves of this woodland sky. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading a different one than you have up there. I'll read this one. I keep changing. It's, as I said, it's a draft. Okay, we'll start over. A crane language. From where behind you ancient light enters, a fissure in the propriety of reason. No trailing words or sound, only first translucence. Sun turning the hose of your throat to a vessel of fire. Arthurian sword of your tongue, angled like a sundial against the cup of all reluctance. Stone or flesh. Oh, dang, guys. Can I do the one that I have here? Because that is so old, and it doesn't have the, sorry. Okay, so this is my little goof. I'll try not to have another one. A crane language. From where behind you ancient light enters, curves of this woodland sky, a fissure in the propriety of reason. Stitched here is first translucence, sun turning the hose of your throat to a vessel of fire, body angled like a sundial against the cup of all reluctance, this rock-cold clan longing, this silence. Release now from the weighted anchor of time, a torch of language, jashagi, The flame of your tongue gives light. So the difference between that and the one I read is this one still wasn't, that was the poem before I began to put the pieces of the other part of the image in there. So you kind of see the process too. Okay, so I'll do the next one with 2 pages. So when Winona was here, she was talking about Menominee Geesis. We've been talking, Dylan talked about wild rice. We're all, kind of, this is a season. And this is a poem that I wrote about the connection we have, not with just the season that's before us, but with all those seasons and all those people that we knew who riced before us and who reseeded the beds in the lake, right? Okay. Menominee Geesis, ricing moon when poling arms groan like autumn winds through white pine. Old rhythms find the hands, bend and pound the rice kernels falling onto wooden ribs, canoe bottoms filling with memories. New moccasins dance the rice. Huffs of spirit wind lift and carry the chaff, blown like tired histories from birch bark winnowing baskets. Now numbered by pounds, seasons, or generations, lean slivers of parched grain settle brown and rich, tasting of northern lakes, of centuries. So this is also a piece that was, someone made me this beautiful version of this on handmade paper, which is, I wanted it to be rice in the paper, but that was too harsh on the, it was letterpress, so it was going to be too harsh on the letters, so they did cattail and cotton, but it's just like gorgeous paper, so every sheet is slightly different, and they did a really beautiful art image with it. So maybe we'll walk through, but I won't do each one. So if you go to the next one, just so you can see. So this is really now ekphrastic, right? Where the poem and the piece are working together. Maybe I'll do tincture. The shaft of your eye catching the reflected light of these Minnesota lakes. Bad medicine, height of land, sugar bush, south twin, white earth, a long sequence of wet bodies beneath bobbers, of dark eyes squinting into sunlight, into green depths. The flash of your vision, a replica of the striking bass, white-scaled belly turning in the reeds. The movement there says everything that must be said. I lift the net, you point your chin. The fish dives, and your pole bows as if in politeness. We gesture, dance lightly across the years. And I thought reflection timeless, but it dins. Okay, and then if you walk through it, so this is, I do haiku, and I do haiku often because it's connected with Anishinaabe dream songs. But we'll go on to the next one. So they're all my photographs that I'm working with as well. This one is actually a poem that came out of my, I have a Dakota sister-in-law, and she took us several times to that confluence that Waz was talking about the other day, and the history that's there, and she did some wonderful teaching and storytelling with my children, and this came out of there. But again, it's just to show you what I'm up to, and I'm not going to read it. Next. This is an example of a full-blown Picto-Poem where I have layers of text and image. So, canyon wall. Okay, so I think in this room, the do not copy, you get the irony of that. We can't own, we can't copy, we can't possess the canyon wall. But the first time this was shown in a gallery, and it's on a big metal thing, so it looks a little bit like canyon. They called me, they said, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with the piece that arrived. It's like, what's wrong? Well, it has this, what do they call that, copyright? What do they call it? Something. What is it?
Watermark.
Yeah, it has a watermark on it. And I'm thinking, oh man, either I don't get it or they don't get it, right? So anyway, do not copy. The image is my daughter and I were hiking up in the Bandelier National Park, and we were at the cliff dwellings, and there was a moment when the sun came out and it cast her shadow to the interior wall of the cliff dwelling, and something just jumped inside of me, and I flipped up my camera, because isn't that what we are? You know, that leaning into our past, the connection between all that was and what we are, and me on the other side taking this photo of what you know, that's that long length of time. And so I tried to, again, think of this handwritten, but I tried to show that sort of her looking at her past and that long length of her shadow, not her body, but her shadow. So, ephemeral habitation at Kavate, leaning here, these lines lift like body, like a length of time, tilted, turned into mottled wall of infinity, where figures, ancient figures draw near to simple shadow cast, and ancients too cast images across and into earth caverns, where cliff dwellers left mark of fire art, or left that empty anchor looming. And now we lean in to where? To where another weaving refused the simple erasing summary with copper and shadow, angle and layer, marked slant and thin, each generation of line fleeting as air. So if there is a poem that's sort of poety in here, with its the physical space on there and the breath and everything, this is the one. So it's not really narrative. It's a different kind of gesture. Okay, so the next one, we talked about those stereotypic images early in the conference. I can't remember who mentioned, and we all thought Edward Curtis, right? And so this is a piece that I did where this is actually a piece out of the Western history. The image is from the Western History Collection at Norman, Oklahoma. And when I first saw it, I was just blown away, because here's this woman who is having a studio photo taken, and see how her hair is coming outside that frame. And in my mind, it's this metaphorical framing of the stereotypic Indian person, right? And so I had to work with that. And I feel like, was it the photographer, was it her who saw the irony of this? And I sure think it was her. I want to give her credit. So then what's interesting is NASA, Native American Indigenous Studies Association, with which some of you are probably associated, they also then took this and recreated it with, I've forgotten, it's the granddaughter of one of the people who was on the committee for the year, and they took an image of her with a frame with her hair outside to show that same kind of thing. It was really great. So they put both of these in the program, whatever year that was. So just being aware of time, I'm not going to read it, except to say that it is not about capture, but about escape from it. Aniwewe batu, run away, making noise, which is what we're doing. We're leaving that frame. We refuse that framing of Native people. The next one. And this is another one about that sort of captivity. And sometimes I use this sort of, the what can't be said as well. I'm going to, I guess I'm going to pick to read this one. No, I'm not. I'm just going to show you what that is. And it is about the different kinds of captivity. Really, it is also about the frequent racial profiling of Native people and the higher percentage of Native people in jails than non-Native people, and it sort of touches on that as well. Yeah. And then this is I have a student who's a former student who sends me weird things, and one time he sent me a packet of photographs that he found at a flea market, and I sometimes work with found images as well as found language. This is dancing resistance, and it's about different ways that we embody our difference, and that's actually me in a jingle dress, that little piece of it up there. But that's what that poem is about. Okay, can I see this one twice? I mean, double. And only in this room would I have to say that the image has to be considered a part of the several creatures who were part of the creation story, who dived down for that earth, because it does not match the text. But nobody else in the world would even recognize that except you guys, because you know the difference between a beaver and a muskrat. So this connects up with all of those people who were talking about our creation story and how we came to be on Turtle Island. And I have a colleague, Meg Newton, who we work together sometimes, and she kindly, so you'll see in some of my poems I have pieces of the language. I grew up at White Earth. I grew up with my grandparents speaking the native language, Anishinaabe and my older aunts and uncles. And I grew up in my grandfather's house for the first few years, so I have that language sound, but I don't have grammar, and I didn't maintain a lot. So I have pieces of it, like things will come out, and I know things like we had to speak at the table, right? If we wanted we us, or if we wanted dudu shabu bimbade or whatever, we had to ask for it in the language. And so, but there was a big period of time where it wasn't used, and so I'm now relearning the language myself. But so Meg Newton, who is fluent, she did this translation on the right side, and we wanted it to show to suggest the image of Wajjushk diving down for that piece of earth. And maybe I will read this one. Dreams of water bodies. Wajjushk, small whiskered swimmer, you, a fluid arrow crossing waterways, with a simple determination of one who has dived purple deep into mythic quest, belittled or despised as water rat on land, hero of our Anishinaabe peoples in animal tales, creation stories, whose tellers open slowly, magically, like within a dream, your tiny clenched fist, so all water tribes might believe. See the small grains of sand, only those poor few, but they become our Turtle Island, this good and well-dreamed land where we stand in this moment on the edge of so many bahis of water, and watch Wajjushk, our brother, slip through pools and streams and lakes, this marshland earth hallowed by the memory, the telling, the hope, the dive of sleek whiskered swimmers who mark a dark path. And sometimes in our water dreams, we pitiful land dwellers in longing recall and singing make spirits ready to follow. Bakobi, go down into the water. Okay, if you could just walk through them. So here's a couple more. Water is a big deal for Anishinaabe people, and especially people from Minnesota. And so a lot of my work is connected to Nabi, the waters. Okay, and so you'll see, and also reflection and refraction, right? And that the way that they suggest and other reality, that spiritual reality, that other world that is there just at our fingertips, but maybe just not quite within our grasp, only in particular moments, as you told in your storytelling, those moments when we are in that place, where we long to stay. So those are a couple of poems that deal with that. If you would go to the next one, and give me only one image, which is the image itself, the colored. Okay. So this is I think sometimes you don't have a need to see the language, but to maybe hear it. So this is about that time in which we might lose our sense of humanness when we are in a natural place. And I've written this poem for a poet colleague of mine. He was one of those teachers that we all wish we had once in our life. It's called Refractions, a poem for Bill Harold. Oh, and before I start, one thing about Bill Harold was he had a physical, I guess you could say, challenge, which left him stiff, and he often stood like this. And to me, this looks like a cricket. Okay, that's why there's going to be a cricket in the poem. And you probably know that the speed at which a cricket chirps changes with the temperature, so you can actually tell the temperature by how fast a cricket is chirping. And the only other thing that you may need to know is Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, northeastern Minnesota. I referenced that. Refractions, a poem for Bill Harold. Why should it happen that the smallest zigzagging black cricket, one stick leg raised, a musician's baton, holds and then releases the same song as my canoe paddle slicing into glass? Boundary Waters evening lake, still mirroring like memory doubles, you here and gone, now leaning akimbo, a cricket musician, message encoded in meter, in the rhythm of my own arms, paddling side to side, as if I could find you in the funnel of each stroke, in the blue sluice of time. And light grabs my breath again, peering into that one space where ledge rock dissolves into color, cascades gray and rust and moss green, effortlessly transforming at water's edge, unfolding mirror image, tumbling headlong into repetition, into the depthless eternity of reflection, until in that moment I forget which side of vision is mere reality, and that this bent black line of insect can sing, and more, that every chirp should count in precise degrees, just how cold is loss. Okay, so the next one, and maybe only the image. And we're all here by the grace of those people who are gone before us. And in the last years, I feel like I've lost a lot of people who were important to me. And this is a poem that I wrote as a way of trying to, as I said, poetry is how we're reaching for understanding, and this is my reaching for understanding. And I say it here today, sing it, perform it for you, and for all those people who have been important to you, who have passed. Afterwards, because the smallness of our being is our only greatness, because one night I was in a room listening until only one heart beat, because in these last years I've worn and nearly worn out my black funeral shoes, because the gesture of afterwards means the same thing, no matter who speaks them, because faith, belief, forever are only words, no matter, because matter disappears always and eventually, because action is not matter, but energy that's spent changes being. And if death too is a change of being, perhaps action counts. And if death is a land of unknowing, perhaps we do well to live with uncertainty. And if death is a forested land, it would be good to learn trees. And if death is a kingdom, it would be good to practice service. And if death is a foreign state, we should loosen allegiance to this one. And if our soul leaves our body, then we must rehearse goodbye. Okay. So the next two images, and this is good. This is a really short one. I'll do this really quickly. This is about resistance, and it's about supporting resistance. I was in the Kingdom of Bahrain in the October before the Arab Spring, and there's so much I could tell you about that experience, but to say that the people that I met with in the Bahraini Writers Association were on fire, and it was no surprise to me that they became a part of the Arab Spring, the revolution. And I want to say a lot, but I'm just going to read this poem. And, we're here, we're comfortable. We're in this lovely spot. And there are people who are not. Unlawful assembly. Don't hurry to safety. Each hour your flowered room grows smaller. Everywhere at the periphery of vision, windows shatter into triangles of mosaic light. There, in the lonely fragments, a YouTube dictator declares victory. Blood flattens and darkens. The scent of rebellion, smoke, fire, and ash, all pungent in the still images sacrificed to history. Somewhere, the flapping door of an overturned wagon thumps steadily in a deserted street, echoes absent hands. So mining, the fight for preventing mining in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, and other places now in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, and every time you turn your bloody back, right, we know the pipeline, it's about our attempts to protect those spaces. And this is a bizarre poem, okay? But I know we have people from all different kind of areas, people who are scientists, mathematicians, artists, philosophers. So I hope you find an entrance to this. It's bizarre, that's all I can tell you. But I do want to do this one for you. The top pictograph, in the very corner you might recognize that sort of pale image of someone who has been very bad for Wisconsin. And I don't know. I can't exactly explain this, but I hope you get it. Of the many ways to say, please stand. 1, partial differential equation. What we erase from polite conversation. Bodies on fire. The historic cleansing of the landscape. The sweep of humanity, west, 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 environmental racism. All things being equal, things are never equal. Think of scope, like the reach of the imperial, or consider variables, value or commodity, ways of seeing 7 generations into the past, 7 generations into the future. Angles and perspectives, convenience policy, a tally mark across generations, uranium mining, atomic bomb detonation at White Sands, a complicated table of fallout factors, plumes of greatness, or how to solve for survival. 2, Zongadin, be brave. Another partial differential equation. Let's say a corporation proposes a mine. Variables include Tyler Forks, bad potato rivers, a 22-mile, 22,000-acre strip of land, jobs, monomen, open pit, exceptional or outstanding resource waters, legislation, iron oxide, fish, blasting and pulverizing, new legislation. The function depends upon the continuous variables, fluid flow, for example, and changing laws. Somewhere along the granite line, someone enters. Let's say they have put down one life and taken up another. The solution of the PDE. Warriors, walleye, Indian, New Age face arbitrary functions, changing laws, guards, guns, we could say dogs. If the life is stretched across 2 points, it vibrates. We cannot measure that vibration in this generation. We can sing it or make it into light. So, sorry, that was originally for, at the university, of course, we can't sponsor resistance activities, so we sponsored an educational activity around the mining. Okay, so a couple, maybe one or two more poems. I'm gonna walk through just walk through these. Just working with image and text. Again, refraction and what all that means and how we see or, see or don't see what we think we see or whatever. Next. Again. Another. Could you put that one up twice? I mean, in the two view. So this is from when I visited Taiwan, and a place where they took me hiking in the mountains to find no wild creatures. And this was part of what I wrote about that. So again, we are privileged here with what we have, but we have to work to protect it. If you go to the next one. On the right, maybe just the right one showing only that. So I said before that part of the reason I work out of the haiku tradition is because it's very near the Anishinaabe dream song tradition. If you think of like if I can think of, okay, so a dream song, translation of Anishinaabe dream song, with a large bird above me, I am walking in the sky. With a large bird above me, I am walking in the sky. So you see that the way that haiku work are very similar. I could give you this whole lecture about how it's possible that, well, never mind. I could give you a whole literary lecture, but the idea is I also work in haiku because I find an affinity there. And I'm just going to, this is an image, I'm going to read you, I'm only going to read you one of these just because of time. But in haiku, in dream songs, you read them twice. First time it gets in your head, the second time in your heart, your belly, and your spirit. Iron, cold, and wild, 1,000,000 wet blue acres. Drink in your smallness. Iron, cold, and wild, 1,000,000 wet blue acres. Drink in your smallness. And maybe show this two ways. Okay, so there are other poems I wanted to share with you that weren't in here, but I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to close with this one, and just know that what I do is also larger than what you saw here today, and I'm sure that's true of what everyone has shown us. So I guess this one, well, maybe more than the others, kind of pulls in some of the ideas that many people were talking about. Minobamadizi. On the brow of the weakened world, this August sun still spills warmth. Here where wrinkled vein hands gather herbs, here in the copper memory of Minobamadizi, we camp once more under this canopy of regret, sprinkle each fragrant offering over fire, clasp songs tight on the throat strings of ancient belonging, chant belief in any language you know. Aki, Nibi, Gaye Anishinaabe, Nandawi Ewe Nagamo. Sing healing songs for earth that bleeds, the tired waters, and all the tired warring peoples. Name the tribes and vibrating cells of rock and sweetgrass, of tobacco and sage, of shawl, pipe, drum, and rattle, of Magizi wings and sweet cedar smudge rising. Here in the strong heart of ceremony we wait, leaves teaching a spiral calm. Soon words gather like medicine, mashkiki, beaded now into seated images, into litanies of clan relatives, loon song and bear stories, the mineral regalia of sky. Once more, echoes of crane clans nourish our journey, rhythm lifting the sad fever of forgetfulness, everywhere making us whole. Minauya. Language. I'm happy to take questions if there's time. I'm looking at my sad little poems that didn't get read that were so perfect for you, but whatever you want to ask.
Maybe in the closing ceremony.
Oh, I could, yeah, there's maybe one that'd be perfect for that. But do you have questions or comments, suggestions? Like I said, I'm working on this as a project that's almost there, but not quite there. Yes?
Just incidental, that image accompanying the one of Taiwan, that looked like the bank vault in the Museum of Midwest American Art in Elkhart.
The image behind it? No, it was actually, when I was there, they were so wonderfully hospitable, as people always are, and they had this whole art opening at which they featured me performing, and that was one of the images that, because it was sort of this mapping image, which I always love, it really pulled me in, so I just took a quick photo on my phone, which then later, I thought I'd like to pull that into this. Yeah, and yeah. Yes?
I know this can't be answered in a minute, but I'm going to ask it anyways. I'm curious about your evolution as a poet.
Again?
I'm curious about your evolution as a poet. How did you come to be here? Have you always written poetry or?
Well, so I actually write in a lot of genres. I've published fiction, creative nonfiction. Of course, I published scholarship as a professor. So my evolution is I was this shy little girl, and actually you may see a little bit of that in the way that I'm sort of on the edges of things. And that's how I was growing up. I was listening. I was because I was quiet. I could hear a lot that the noisy kids were swept outside, but I was there listening. And so I was always just absorbing, and I came from a family of really amazing storytellers, and we lived in the middle of nowhere. So White Earth Reservation, when I was growing up on my grandparents' farm, we're like most people's grandparents, no running water, wood for heat, no plumbing. We have horses to get us to the village store, every couple of weeks. So we're really out there, and so the oral culture was what we did for entertainment, So I feel like that was the gift that I received. And, the very first huge celebration of Native writers was called Returning the Gift, 1992 in Norman, Oklahoma, and we've had those since then. And I feel like that is what I've dedicated my life to, because so many of the people in my family were of an era where all they were doing was trying to survive. And yet I felt like I wanted to carry their stories, and I wanted to carry, to honor them in some way, and to try to work for survival, work for continuity, work for, the new nations that we are now, strongly building, right? And so that's sort of where that was kind of what fueled my writing. when I was at Notre Dame, I'd always been writing really bad poetry my whole life since I learned how to write. And some people may say I'm still doing it. I hope not. But when I was at Notre Dame, I was a part of something called Writers and Other Troubadours, which was off campus. I think Walter Davis, who used to be here and then went to Brown University, who also was kind of maybe not the perfect fit for Notre Dame, which I probably wasn't. He had this group and it was really wonderful. And then when I was a beginning professor at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, I was still a graduate student. I had students of color come to me and say, our work is not understood or welcome in the classroom. People don't get it and they don't understand our aesthetic. And so they asked me, could I meet with them? So we had, starting then, but going on for 12 years, I had a group of writing students we called the Word Warriors. And I credit them with much of my persistence in writing, because I felt like I was supporting them, and always when you are doing something for someone else, it feeds you and it fed my own writing. And so I felt like that was really important. But the thing the thing that I love about teaching is the students, right? But the thing that I hate about teaching is students who grow up and go away and leave you. So there was this rotating group of students, and then many of them became very accomplished. And then we did we actually did cyber haiku online. But always I was, just continuing to write, sometimes new in different ways. I credit my relative Gordon Henry for also, stretching me. I have a very eclectic love of various kinds of poetry. I love Rumi, as Rumi is just, I think, amazing. Many of the Native poets that I met early on, Simon Ortiz and Linda Hogan and Joe Bruchac, and a lot of those poets are really important to me. But then there's a whole, again, you just keep connecting. My father would say he lived to be 93. And one time I came home and he took me out for a beer, which was his thing to do. And he wanted to introduce me to his good friend. And so he introduced me to his good friend. And I said, Daddy, I graduated high school with him. So my dad was 40-some, I'm sorry, he was way older than that. He was considerably old, because my dad was my mom, never mind, but he was really old. And he was way older than this best friend. And he said, I have to keep making new friends because the old ones keep dying, right? Which is just, oh my Lord. But I feel like that's being Zongadi, that's being brave, right? Because that's what we have to do, is we keep having to embrace what comes and hang on to what we have. It's we really do have to do that, I think, in our writing too. Because there's a lot of Native writers who maybe aren't celebrating what I think are really, I used to say that the difference between non-Native work and Native writing is that all Harold Bloom anxiety of influence, that non-Native writers have this need to figuratively get rid of their predecessors, right? And I felt like Native writers, rather than having an anxiety of influence, had a celebration of influence. And that is really part of what I do in my work, is try to keep connected with all that is happening with Native writers in the community and so on. But I worry that institutions and creative writing and the FAs and PhDs might be putting a wedge that we have to keep working against for Native writers. And I'm really happy to have joined the MFA low-res faculty at IAA, because we get to work with these young Native writers. But my own work just continues to evolve, and I always look back and kind of cringe. Like my first book, I don't bring it out anymore. But when I go places, people still, they're pulling pieces from that and teaching it. So it's humbleness too, because you let that work go out in the world, and it's out in the world and it does its own job, and then we just have to accept it. It's not perfect. We're not perfect people. And so I keep trying to, do better. So.